Our records of Paul's life are much earlier than our records of Muhammad's life. And here I don't just mean that Paul came centuries before Muhammad, and so we have earlier sources for Paul's life. I mean that when we talk about the teachings and deeds of Paul, the biographical sources we use are much closer to the events they report than the biographical sources we use when we talk about the teachings and deeds of Muhammad. Our earliest biographical sources on Paul were written during the lifetime of Paul. The book of Acts was written in the early 60s, before Paul was martyred, and it was written by a traveling companion of Paul, who was an eyewitness to many of the details he reported. Muslims quote stories about Muhammad are usually getting their information from sources like Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, which were written 2 centuries after the time of Muhammad. But it gets worse. The main reason for composing works like Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim was that Muslims were composing so many false stories about Muhammad, people didn't know what to believe. Scholars like Bukhari decided that they needed to collect stories they thought were accurate in order to distinguish them from the ever-increasing supply of false narrations. When we learn about Paul, we learn about him through first-generation eyewitness accounts. When we learn about Muhammad, we learn about him through late sources written by people who didn't know him, whose parents didn't know him, and whose grandparents didn't know him. People who were fishing for historical facts in a sea of fabrication and deception.